Okay, good evening. Yeah, it's summer evening here and people online. Yeah, also good evening. Also summer in the room everywhere, I can see. Yeah, so today we're gonna talk a little bit about how to establish a daily practice, and well, based upon the little booklets you've probably seen already, right? Of how to use this booklet with meditation Sakyamuni Buddha and the four measurables. So I will, go over a few important points and why, in order to progress on the stages of the path to enlightenment, right, from better human being, all the way up to getting the realizations of the Dhamrim, to be of the greatest benefit for all sentient beings. So try to generate that kind of motivation for yourself. And in the front, imagine Sakyamuni Buddha, surrounded by the masters of India, Tibet, and the other Buddhist traditions, and surrounding yourself countless beings undergoing individual physical and mental sufferings, and think it's our purpose or our aim or the need to lead them to enlightenment. And we start that purpose with leading them in the prayers.
To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceased, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of the free times I prostrate. Ayata, gata gata paragata parasamgata bodhisoha. Ayata, gata gata paragata parasamgata bodhisoha. Ayata, gata gata paragata parasamgata bodhisoha.
Sangye
Chodan suke chonam la janji
Badu Dani Gyasuchi Dagi China Gibe Sonaki
Jola Penche Sangye
Joba Jo Sangye Chodan Sungi Chuna Janje Badu Dani Gyasuchi Dagi China Gibe Sonaki Yola Penche Sangye Joba Jo Sangye Chodan
Suke chonam la
Janje Badu Dani Gyasuchi Dagi China Gibe
sonam ki Jola Penche Sangye Joba Shu.
Yeah, so last week we went over various aspects of personal practice, right? Of the 7-limb prayer and the 6 preliminary practices, like cleaning your room, putting offerings, and offering the 7-limb prayer, and those kind of aspects we went over last week. Right? So today we try to see how does that fit in a kind of a daily practice, you could say, or how could you do something like that on a daily basis, you know? So what we talked about also last time is it's important to do that in the time of the day you have some space, right? Or you're not too busy, or you're not too tired. Yeah, so it's always best to do something like that in the mornings, you know, when you just wake up, wash your face, and then, yeah, if your room is not clean, probably your room is already clean, I suppose, right? Or you put things on the side if things are in the way. But just the mere, or what you could do also, if your room has just been vacuumed or something, you can just burn some incense, right? And then purify your room in that way. Yeah, you say Om Ahum 3 times, yeah, Om Ahum, and then you purify with the incense your room, yeah, so that you can purify. Incense also kind of an aspect of purification, right? So then you can think, okay, I did this first preliminary aspect of purifying my room, right? When you have some incense and yeah, and put it in incense box or whatever thing you have to put it in. Yeah. And then if you traditional, we went over the offerings, like you can see also today. You can just have one set of 7 bowls with offering bowls with water inside, like you see here, for example, yeah, as we explained last week. Yeah, so then you can just make a small offering for that day or for that particular session. Yeah, so we said the purpose of the offering is not that the Buddhas need offerings, but for us to respect the qualities of the Buddha's mind, yeah, or the qualities of the Buddha's physical qualities or the speech, right? So you can think about the qualities of Buddha's body, speech, and mind. Or more important, you can think about you want to become a Buddha, or you want to get these kind of qualities of loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom. For that purpose, you make these offerings, right? Yeah, and then we also talked about it's good to offer the things we like, or even better, things we attach to, yeah, so that we offer to the Buddhas, you know, as a form of detachment, yeah, and also as a form of accumulating merit, yeah, not that you give the dry biscuits to the Buddha and then the juicy ones with the chocolate you keep for yourself, right? So that's kind of, we have to be honest with ourselves, and that, yeah, generosity in one aspect is for the purpose of accumulating merit, and so merit or virtuous deeds, because every time you do something, oh, I wanted to have these qualities of love and kindness, compassion, and wisdom, you come closer, right? So that's actually why we have those various practices to keep our mind busy, so to say, in creating course to get closer to those qualities, you know. So that's kind of a reason why offerings can help quite a bit. So yeah, you sit down, you purify your room with some incense, then you make these offerings either with, yeah, the traditional set of offerings or the things you like, yeah. And then you sit down on your seat. So it's also good to have a seat that is different from your bed, if you have that, you know. Yeah, in the monasteries where we live, used to stay, then you only have your bed, you know, that is not a soft mattress, because the soft mattress in the West, they like this, right? But now it's also changing a little bit, but in the early days, we had this coconut mat. It was very firm. It's almost like a piece of wood, basically. Yeah. So that is, for sleeping is very nice, because when you wake up, there's no, like if you have a very soft mattress, then you completely sink in, and then you wake up, it's like, okay. Yeah. So if you get used to sleep on a kind of firm mattress, I got one here, and it's called rock hard. It's not really rock hard, but that's the firmest one they could get. It's quite still. Yeah, but in the monastery we have, your bed is the place to sleep, there's a place to study, and there's the place to do your prayers on, generally speaking, no, if you don't have much space. Yeah, but yeah, if you have some space, if you just have a room by yourself, because in the monastery you're mostly shared rooms, right? But if you have a room by yourself, you can maybe organize a kind of like cushion you have here, right? These days you can order everything online, a little bit firm, right? If it's too soft, then what happens if the cushion you sit on is too soft, or the chair you sit in is too soft, then you sink in like this, and then you sit like that, right? So that's kind of why initially it feels comfortable because it's soft, but the longer you sit, the more annoying, because yeah, it's tiring, because the back sinks in and your knees, they come up, right? So it's better to have a firm mattress to sit on, or cushion whatsoever, or a chair, if you sit on a chair. Like the chairs we have here, they're quite firm, I think, right? Yeah, so that's yeah, it's good, because then you don't sink inside and you can keep your spine straight, which is very important, as we talked about last time. Yeah. And then, yeah, you can do some breathings, exercises as we've done before, or generate motivation, yeah. And then you visualize the merit field in front, right? Buddha Sakyamuni. So the practice we're gonna go over today is also in relation with visualizing Sakyamuni Buddha in front of yourself. Yeah, we did it already a few times when we did some meditations on different topics, right? Visualizing Sakyamuni Buddha in front, then the white light and golden or yellowish nectar light. Yeah, so this text we go over today is very similar in that regard. Yeah, yeah. So then you visualize that in front, and then you do the 7-limb prayer. Yeah, so you can make a traditional 7 limbs of homage, making offerings, or because mentally you create all kind of offerings. Yeah, you can visualize, right? We have a few external offerings of flowers or things we like, but we can also imagine that the union, there's one person sitting there, but there's countless, duplicates of yourself making offerings, you know? Or when you make prostrations, for example, you think there's countless duplicates of yourself making prostrations. Then you actually, it's a kind of a more, yeah, it creates more causes for merit and purification. Yeah, the more individuals of yourself are making prostrations, the more you purify. The more individuals of yourselves are making offerings, the more you accumulate. And so that's kind of a few aspects of making prostrations and making offerings, right? And then you confess, and we went over the 4 opponent powers of regret, right? And power of reliance, of taking refuge or generating bodhicitta, right? And then the actual antidote. So with the purification, with confessing and purifying, also when you do this practice as we go over today, with Sakyamuni Buddha, then you also imagine white light comes from the heart of the Buddha to your crown, right? So that also can, and fills your whole body, you know? So the white light from the Buddha to your crown filling your whole body is also basically an aspect of purification, right? Yeah, so you can think like that when you do the confessing limb, and then you rejoice in the virtue of oneself, in the good deeds of oneself and of others, yeah, as we went over. And then you request the teachings to the teacher and the Buddha, and request to remain. Yeah, so that's kind of a few aspects of the 7-limb prayer we went over. Yeah, and then you dedicate. Yeah, yeah. So the text you can use as a basis for daily practice is the text you got, what's called a daily meditation on Sakyamuni Buddha, right? So there are many forms of practice, and Buddhism is one way very complex and one way very vast and has a huge amount of practices. You know, so you say Sakyamuni Buddha is the origin, right? The authentic teacher, so to say. But you have all kind of other deities, right? Like Aryatara, the female Buddha of activity, or medicine Buddha, the Buddha of eliminating obstacles and curing sickness, right? So in nature, they're all the same. Yeah, all Buddhas in nature, they're actually all the same. They just have different aspects, you know? One has an aspect of purification, the other one has an aspect of helping out, like Aryatara. She also sits, you know, with her right leg extended, yeah? So she's ready to get up, right? So that means he's ready to get up to help us, you know? So that's, there's a lot of symbolism in the various deities or the various forms of Buddhas. Because if you are a Buddha, you will take any aspect that's of benefit for beings, right? If somebody needs to have a sickness cured or an obstacle pacified or helping out here and there, then they use whatever is possible, right? So there's so many different types of karma, different types of activities. And that's also exactly why we have so many different types of Buddhas. You know, there's yeah, an infinite number of various colors and various implements and gestures or mudras, as we call it. And it's all symbolic, right? It's a huge symbolism behind it all. But the main meaning is that they're all the same from the point of view of the nature of the mind. Yeah, they have the same qualities. They are all omniscient, you know, they have the qualities of loving kindness, compassion, and wisdom, right? But they just show different aspects for different activities to help beings, you know? Yeah. So yeah, this practice we focus upon today is Sakyamuni Buddha, because that's the historical Buddha, right? So that's kind of as an uncommon kind of aspect there as well, because of that aspect. But you can also think whatever you feel a connection with, they're all in the same nature, but just different aspects. You know? So when you visualize Sakyamuni Buddha, you can think there's the same nature as Aryatara, for example, right? Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a few aspects. Yeah, so then in the actual booklet, yeah, so I don't know which version they have in Spanish, but because there's many versions, so Kiko has a similar one, right? Kiko, you have a similar? Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay, exactly. Okay, okay, that makes it easier for Kiko also, because for me it's easy to just blah, 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 blah. But Kiko has to translate it all for the Spanish people, you know. So I know translating is always the work is much harder than actually the teacher's work. You know, I translate many teachings in the early days. So yeah, I know Kiko. Yeah, he's having a more difficult job than I do, and it's also a bit warmer in Spain, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then, as we have the same booklet, so yeah, the first Lama Zopa Rinpoche in this particular booklet said, of course, it's important to generate a motivation, right? So when you do the daily practice, you don't have to read it all, right? What Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, you just read it once a while, and then you know more or less how to think, right? That's very important, right? The main purpose of doing these practices is not rushing through and reading the material, you know. The main purpose is contemplating the meaning, right? That's every practice we do here, medicine, Buddha, or Tara, or whatever practice we do. The main purpose is contemplating the meaning, right? Or the prayers we do before, or sometimes Heart Sutra, whatever you do. The words actually are like a meditation guide. You know, they guide us to what to think. They guide us to. So every form of practice we do, or call it a ritual, or whatever you like to call it, is just for the purpose of for our mind to make it easier to think in a structured way. You know, that's actually why we have these texts, right? If you just do it as a ritual and you just recite it like you play a MP3 player, then there's not much effect on the mind, right? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm very good with that, especially when you have memorized things, then you just recite without contemplating, and then there's a fault, right? It's important to contemplate the meaning. That's the most important aspect, because that's why these masters, they write things down to give us guidelines how to think in a structured way. Yeah. So then when it says on that page number 7 in the English version, then it talks about first generate the motivation. Yeah, so that's kind of, as we already talked about many times, the motivation is very, very essential. Yeah, so then Lama Zopa Rinpoche has a few aspects there that you didn't die yet. It is very true. Yeah, and then to use the precious opportunity we have. Yeah, and then in particular, the precious opportunity to progress in the Lamrim, or the stages of the path to enlightenment, all the way up to Buddhahood, right? Why? In order to help beings who are lost. So that's we do that already almost every week, you know, before we start, we generate correct motivation. Yeah. So there's a few aspects of generating motivation. So you can read that if you want to, and then think about it, or you can generate your own motivation. You don't have to follow everything exactly by the book, as we say. Yeah. So these kind of practices are guidelines, you know. So whenever you feel some other thought or some other motivation beneficial for you, then you use that, right? So that freedom is there, right? Just this kind of, we do these things in order to benefit our mind, you know. So that's important to know, that you shouldn't take things always completely literally, but it helps, you know, because it's written by people who got the experience or got the realization, so it carries a kind of blessing, right? Yeah. Yeah, so that's about motivation. So after the motivation, then the actual text talks on page number 9 of the booklet that you take refuge, yeah, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. But here also it says the Guru is Buddha, the Guru is Dharma, the Guru is Sangha also, yeah. So the Guru, or the teacher, or we used the term before, the virtuous friend, right, is quite essential in the Buddhist practice, and also in the Hindu practices and many other forms of faith. Yeah, the teacher has quite an essential aspect, because thanks to the teacher we get the understanding of the Dharma, right? So that's why sometimes that's also included in taking refuge. And then particularly if you see the teacher as a Buddha, for example, you don't have to do that, of course, you know. But yeah, for those who engage in more in-depth practice, so to say, then it seems to be quite an essential aspect of the practice. Yeah, so there's a kind of a verse that you take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, as we went already over in the previous model, right? The model on refuge and what does it mean, Buddha, what does it mean, the Dharma, what does it mean, the Sangha, and then we also remember that the resultant refuge is the most profound one, right? That you yourself become a Buddha, that you yourself get the realizations, yeah? That you yourself develop your mind. Yeah, that's the real safe direction, so to say. Yeah, if your own mind is free of afflictions, that's a real safe direction, right? That's much more important than the external force, right? So that you yourself. Yeah, so the Buddhas, even if the Buddha appears in front of you, the Buddha will not be able to give you a magical pill or something like that. Yeah, the Buddha will say, okay, it's all written down. You know, you have to say, the Buddha appears in front of yourself, and they say, oh, wow, now I see the Buddha. But then the Buddha will say, yeah, look, it's all written down in scriptures. There's so many things translated in English. Read it, put it into practice. Yeah, okay. Tashi de le, as we say in Tibetan, that means okay, bye-bye. Yeah. So that's what I will say, right? So that's kind of, don't believe in magical kind of course, there can be an uncommon blessing to the power of which you get an insight, right? That can happen, you know. But yeah, eventually we have to do it ourselves, right? So yeah. So yeah, you take refuge, yeah, the first step. And then generating bodhicitta. Yeah, so the verse we recite sometimes, or we recite normally, the refuge and bodhicitta verse before teaching. Yeah, that's very similar. Here it's kind of slightly different wording, you know. Yeah, so with the thoughts, desiring to liberate transmigrated beings, yeah, with the intention to liberate sentient beings, I always go for refuge. Yeah, that means for refuge because I want to become a Buddha to liberate beings, right? So that's kind of with the thought or with the intention of desiring to liberate sentient beings or transmigratory beings. Yeah, in Tibetan we say droa, you know. Sorry, it's not an easy term to translate. And sometimes we say migrators. Sometimes they translate like here, transmigratory beings. In Tibetan we say droa. Yeah. But the meaning is kind of beings who are just wandering around in samsara, you know, wandering around from the point of view of not knowing where to go, what to do. You know, sometimes you see animals doing the same things in the wild, you know, they're just wandering around. They just don't have a clue what's going on. Just looking for food and just no structure, right? So then all sentient beings are actually wandering around because they're overpowered by or forced by karma and afflictions, right? Yeah, so that's also why we see people have emotional hijacks, or people are just following what emotions are in the mind, right? So that's kind of, and because sometimes the emotions are so strong, they control us, you know? So that's even, for us, being able to do something like discovering Buddhism is very fortunate, you know, because there's so many people on this planet who just don't have a clue what's going on, but they make the same mistakes over and over and over again. You know? So that's, in one way, is very sad, and we should generate compassion for them. But in one way also we see, we have now this potential, we should use this potential, right? So that's kind of, then you can see the real meaning of transmigratory beings, not only in this life, but many lifetimes. They just go up, go down, and wander here, wander there, beyond control, just by the power of karma and afflictions. You know? So then the more you contemplate that, the more compassion you will generate for them, right? Yeah. And then because you generate some compassion, and then you think, oh, I need to become a Buddha. I need to get realizations to help them. So that's, you see, the verse itself is just, you know, you can recite it, but you can also sit down and think, okay, what did Namdak say again? Transmigratory beings. What does that mean? And then you think about it, and then that helps the mind, right? So then that's much more important than just rushing through the prayer and finish it off. Yeah? Doing this kind of practice is not like a job you don't like and you want to just finish it as soon as possible, or a project, or a book you're writing, or yeah, a report you're writing. You know, you want to finish it off as soon as possible. Yeah. So this is completely different, right? This is something to transform the mind. You know, so you take time for it. You know, so then some people, they just recite the first line and just contemplate the meaning, and that has impact on your training, right? It's much more powerful than just rushing through the text, you know? Yeah. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche, he was kind of the embodiment of these kind of practices to take time. You know, sometimes you do a normal puja in the traditional monasteries or nunneries, and you do that, let's say, in half an hour, particular prayer. And for Rinpoche, it takes all night long. Yeah. But Rinpoche just stops halfway through and meditate. So Lama Zopa we do here 2 times a month. And because everybody's busy and we structure things, so we mostly do it in 1 hour, 30 minutes or 1 hour, 45 minutes, something like that. But when you do the Lama Zopa Rinpoche, it's like 5-6 hours without a break. Yeah. Yeah. Because Rinpoche stops and meditates, or you know, that's basically the real thing, the way to do it, you know. That too, because then it has an effect on your mind, you know. That's very important to get that idea, you know. So if you read, say, okay, with a thought of desiring to liberate transmigratory beings, and you think, wow. So then every time you take one line, then after a week or so, or 2 weeks, you went through every line of the whole booklet, and you have some more things to think about, right? And then it affects the mind, yeah. So then you see, okay, these beings are wandering around in samsara because they're stuck, because of karma and afflictions. I now have this connection. I take refuge, and I want to become a Buddha to help them. Yeah, and then you recite this, and it's much greater impact on the mind, right? Yeah. And then you say, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I achieve enlightenment, or until the heart of enlightenment is achieved, right? Yeah. So then, with perseverance, acting with wisdom, compassion, and loving kindness in front of all the Buddhas, yeah, you ask them to be a witness for the benefit of sentient beings. I generate the thought of full enlightenment. Yeah. So then, these 2 verses on this page number 9 are meant for the purpose of enhancing your bodhicitta, right? That you doing this practice for the purpose of liberating sentient beings. Yeah. And then the next point in this booklet is purifying the place. And we already talked about the importance of cleaning. Yeah. So even if your room is already clean, you can use incense, or you can read this verse and think everything is pure. It's not your room with a carpet on the floor and the painted walls or something like that. You think it's all like a celestial mansion. The place you are in is like a very like a pure land, you know. So then that's also what says, everywhere may there be ground be pure, free of pebbles and so forth. Yeah. So lives at levels of very smooth, like the palm of your hand, for example, or the nature of different kind of soft and beautiful kind of things you find often in I don't know if you still find them, but you know, you can think about these God realms where everything is perfectly pure and clean and made out of light and you know, all kind of beautiful jewels and you know, but everything you affiliate with purity. Yeah, you think your whole room is made out of that purity, you know. Yeah. You're not just in an ordinary Jamyang courthouse, but you're actually in a kind of celestial mansion. So we try to do that a little bit with all the holy images we have to make it a little bit more according to what should be visualized, right? Yeah. Because that has an effect, you know, when we said before, if you look at a holy image, or you're in a place where there's many holy images, it bestows blessings, or it can have an effect on your mind. You know? Yeah. Yeah, so you think that everything is pure, you place. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first preliminary as we went over. Yeah. And the second one is the invocation. Yeah, you invite the Buddhas. You can think you invite them from the Pure Lands. Yeah? And the traditional, you can have 2 sticks of incense if you want to do it more traditionally. You have 2 sticks of incense and you light and you hold them up with saying this invocation prayer. Yeah, so this invocation prayer, Malu Semchen in Tibetan, that is a very interesting invocation prayer, because once when there was one princess and she had so much faith in the Buddha, and she recited this particular verse with incense, 2 incense sticks on the roof of the palace. And then the king came and have a look, because the Buddha actually appeared with a whole retinue of other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, you know. So it's a very interesting verse that actually came from the time of the Buddha himself. You know, so quite a special verse. Yeah. So savor of all sentient beings, right, without exception. divine destroyer of the unbearable hordes of Maras. Yeah, so Maras, you know what Maras are? Maras are not like demons, but demons or Maras are not external demons or Maras, right? So the main demon or Mara are the afflictions. Yeah, so the afflictions are, yeah, the real demons, so to say. Yeah, afflictions, anger, this strong, excessive, strong desire, and jealousy and pride, you know, and anxiety, fear, depression. Yeah, they are the real Maras, right? The real demons, so to say. They're not externally, but they're within our minds, right? Yeah. So it's very other forms of Maras, but we can go over that another time. But yeah, it's all basically referring to the demons or the Maras of the afflictions, right? Now, the external enemies, they cannot do that much. At the most, they can kill you. That's the worst thing they can do to you, but they can never cause you to be reborn in samsara again and again in various different states, right? But the afflictions, they can do that. So the inner enemy is actually much more dangerous than the external one. So hordes of Maras. So the Buddha is capable of eliminating all those, you know, all those hordes of Maras. Yeah, it's kind of a jihad in one way, but the real meaning of jihad is the same thing, right? To destroy the inner enemy, you know. So it's very similar in many religions and forms of faith. We talk about very similar things, you know, like an arat or a liberated being. You know how we call that? Dra Chomba in Tibetan. Dra means enemy, Chom means to destroy. So the food destroyer, as we call it, right? Yeah, so that means we have to destroy the inner enemy, right? Because if you destroy the inner enemy, there are no outer enemies anymore, right? That's very true, you know. If there's no anger, there's one sticker on Lama Zopa Rinpoche's car in Bodhgaya. It says no anger, no enemy. It makes sense. In one way, it makes sense, right? If you don't have real anger, there's no real enemy out there, you know. So that means that the afflictions are the real enemy or the real Maras, you know. So the Buddha is capable of destroying all these Maras, not by doing it directly, but giving us the methods to do it, right? Yeah. Perfect knower of all things without exception. Yeah. So the Buddha is omniscient. Yeah. Heaven has it is all-knowing might. Yeah. Bhagawan, together with your retinue, please come here. Yeah. So the retinue of all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So we invoke them. Yeah. So that's the visualization of the merit field, as we talked about the other day. You imagine the Buddha actually coming and abiding in front of yourself, right? So that's kind of the invocation. Yeah. Then, after you have invoked the Buddha, then you make offerings. Yeah? So then there's one verse is an offering prayer and one verse is an offering cloud mantra. Yeah. So the offering prayer is just to help us to visualize. You know, we have already set up the offerings in front if you have done that, right? And then you just imagine that what it says here, made divine and human offerings. Yeah. So you can think about the most beautiful offerings you can find on this planet, or you can find in the God realms, you know, and says both actually arranged and mentally emanated. So you have a few things there on your altar, but also you visualize yourself that the whole sky in front of yourself is just filled with offerings to offer to the Buddhas, right? So the more you visualize, the more you offer. The more you offer, the more connection you actually create for these qualities of love and kindness, compassion, and wisdom, right? That's kind of why we always try to put a lot of emphasis on extensive forms of offerings. Yeah, so they are partly physically and also partly mentally created. Yeah, so you can visualize for yourself, as much as possible in front of yourself. Yeah, mentally emanated, it says, you know. So they become clouds of the finest Samantabhadra offerings. So what does that mean, Samantabhadra? Samantabhadra was a bodhisattva, yeah, who was capable of visualizing these kind of very vast forms of offerings. You know that, for example, if you offer 1 cup of tea, you know, then you imagine
that every atom in this cup of tea, yeah, light comes out and is another, I would say, duplicate of yourself offering a cup of tea. So they can imagine there's quite a few atoms in here. So you fill the whole space basically with yourself offering the cup of tea, yeah, and not thinking it's just a herbal tea. I don't know which one it is, but Hookah is the company. Lemongrass. Yeah, lemongrass and ginger. But you just think about countless or whatever drink you like, right? That's the thing, countless forms of the drinks you like in the form of pure nectar, and you offer that. Yeah, so that's kind of what you when you recite this offering praying, because Samantabhadra, he was this bodhisattva who could visualize very extensively, and it says filling the entire realm of space, yeah, in front of yourself. Then there's a mantra. Then the first time you recite a mantra like that, oh, that's a very long one. That takes a long time, you think. That's true. The first time you do something like that, it takes time. But, over time you get habituated to it, and then you can recite. Yeah, I said last week also, Om Hum is a very important mantra because that purifies everything, and then you think everything is transformed from an ordinary biscuit or an ordinary tea into something sublime, right? A kind of a nectar, So with Om Hum is the most important mantra to be recited. And then over time, if you're interested, you can learn this mantra by heart or be able to recite it, because the power of this mantra means that whatever you have offered physically multiplies by the power of this mantra, and yeah. So mantra by itself, mantra means, generally speaking, yikyop in Tibetan. Yikyop means to protect the mind. The real meaning of a mantra is to protect the mind, Protect the mind in the sense that if you recite a mantra, your mind will not engage in afflictions, So that we have various mantras. Om Hum is a mantra, for example. And so if you recite Om Hum, is a very powerful one because it has the transformation of ordinary body, speech, and mind, as we have, into the body, speech, and mind of a Buddha, right? So Om Hum is a kind of a mantra that is protecting the mind, because if you recite it, then afflictions don't have really a strong power to overcome you. Yeah, there's various other mantras, like Om Mani Padme Hum, for example, the mantra of Avalokitesvara, of great compassion, right? And it's definitely true. If you do a retreat, or you do a weekend, or a few days, and you recite a lot of Om Mani Padme Hum, yeah, with a little bit of understanding of what you're doing, that you create causes to generate bodhicitta, for sure the mind is much easier to contemplate love and kindness and compassion because of the power of the mantra, right? So the mantra is basically created by a fully enlightened being. That's why a mantra can be very, very powerful. That fully enlightened being, they create these mantras initially in Sanskrit, right? And that's why, yeah, the mantras can be extremely powerful in that way, because they're created by these Buddhas who have accumulated so much merit and have made prayers over a very long period of time. So it generates a kind of power. But also faith is very important. To have faith that that mantra works. That's very important. If you think, yeah, I don't know if it works, I don't know if it works, I don't know if it works, then it might be difficult. There's this very interesting story about this yogi in Tibet who was not very well educated. So he went to this guru and he got a mantra, and then he was reciting this mantra and he had so much faith, and then when there was a famine, when there was not enough food in the area, he could actually transform certain stones or sand into food, He became kind of a magician, And then one other scholar came to him and said, how did you do that? He said, yeah, I went to this and this guru and he gave me this and this mantra. So this yogi recited this mantra, and this scholar said, no, you completely recited it wrong. It's completely wrong the way you do it. It should be like this. So then he told this yogi, no, you should recite it like that. And then he recited according to the scholar, but then he couldn't do the things anymore. So he went back to his mistake. For him, that was for him the first time he heard it, and that was for him the right way, Yeah. So yeah, mantra, you need a few aspects there, but there's a power from the side of the mantra as well as there should be some faith from our side, right? So when you recite whatever mantra you recite, you should know a little bit more about the mantra, and then it generates some understanding, and with that understanding, it makes more sense, right? Yeah, so that's an aspect. Yeah. Yeah. So here, this mantra, yeah, you can explain every syllable, but yeah, we do it maybe another time. Yeah. So there's a kind of a mantra. When you recite this, you can imagine whatever you've visualized or whatever you have actually offered multiplies in vast amount of numbers. You know? Yeah. So that we call that the offering cloud mantra. Yeah. So the offerings becomes like clouds filling the sky. Yeah? And then after that, there's the power of truth. You know, that means that by the power of truth, that things come about. You know, if the Buddha, for example, also said, by my power of the truth of having achieved enlightenment, may this and this come about. Yeah, so then also sometimes things happened, right? So when the Buddha touched the earth and said, may the earth shake if I have achieved enlightenment, and the earth starts to shake, right? So that means that there's a kind of a power of the truth, that eventually the truth will eventually be true. How do you say that? The truth will eventually win. Yeah, we say that sometimes, right? That because eventually we will understand ultimate reality, isn't it? Yeah, so that's kind of why when we say, oh, by the power of the truth, may these offerings actually become as I intended. Yeah, so that's by the power of the truth of dependent origination, for example. Yeah, so the more you do these practices, you create causes for that to happen in the future, right? So then if you then seal that kind of prayer with the truth, then there's more benefit. Also, when we dedicate, for example, then if you think about dependent origination and emptiness, yeah, whatever understanding you have of interdependence, then it has a very strong positive effect on the prayer we make. Because often we say, I, you know, may I, and then we think the I exists from its own side. Do it this and this in the future, right? So then it's a very contaminated form of a prayer. Yeah? But when you think about the I that doesn't really exist, if you look for it, it's just in nature of dependent origination, then the prayer becomes much more profound. Yeah? So that's also here a reflection upon dependent origination and the blessings of the Buddha and the visualizations I've done and the script, the text I follow, may this and this come about. Yeah, so that's what we call the power of the truth. Yeah. Then on page number 11, there's kind of prostration. Yeah. So you can make a prostration and recite this particular mantra. There's great benefits there, or you can just read it and then prostrate. Yeah. So prostrations, mandala offerings, I can show it to you now, but then you might forget, right? So we have the idea in the winter period to do some training courses, right, on preliminary practices. It means how to do prostrations, how to do kind of mandalas, you know, there's all kind of, how to do these kind of practices as a group, you know. We now go over to do a short meditation today to get an idea how it works. But then eventually you have to train over a period of time, right? So then we have this idea to do, because the model number 14 of this course is actually based upon this integration of these kind of practices, right? Yeah. So now you get a little bit idea of it, and you can read in between more about it, and then yeah, do more extensive aspects. Yeah, so that's the preliminaries, so to say, up till there. Yeah. Then the actual practice, then Lama Zopa Rinpoche explains how to visualize in front of your forehead, as we already did quite a few times in previous models, like a body's length away in the front of yourself, there is Sakyamuni Buddha, right? Whatever you can visualize, and if the visualization is not clear, doesn't matter, as long as you have faith, the Buddha is there. That's very important. Yeah. So then and then to build up your visualization, then it's good to have an image, or on your phone, but make sure your phone is on, how to say, airplane mode, right? Because otherwise you look at the image of the Buddha and before you know it, somebody else pops up. So then you think, oh, you visualize the Buddha, and then all of a sudden somebody else you have to visualize. Yeah, so to make sure the phone is switched off, right? Yeah. Yeah, so you can enlarge, you know, sometimes if you want to look at the detail and visualize. If you want to do more with it, you know, you can use these kind of iPads or phones for a good purpose. You know? Yeah. So that's kind of how to build up the visualization in front of yourself, you know. So to build up the visualization in front, there's two aspects. One is the overall picture, the clarity of the overall picture, and the other one is the stable aspect, to have things stable, right? So to not change things all the time. So when you start with these practices, find an image of the Buddha, you like a lot. It is clear, it is well done, is traditionally done, and has a lot of bright aspects. And then you take it as an example how to visualize. So you look, you visualize. For example, you can look, how does the head and the eyes and everything look like, and then you visualize. Okay, how does the shoulders and the arms look like, and you visualize. Okay, how does the main body look like, you visualize. So you do it in steps, right? And then you build up over the days, you build up more clarity in the details of the visualization. So we do one meditation, and then you know a little bit how to build it up. And then again, there's a motivation for taking refuge. And there's a refuge prayer. In this text, you can read the various aspects of purification, because Rinpoche in this particular text talks about the various purification, right, of white light, as we did before, and the yellowish light, right? So in this particular text you got is just to purify negative deeds we have created with regards to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, right? So you don't have to follow that exactly, but it's just how this booklet is being put aside or put together, you know. Because you can also do it as we normally do in our Lamarim meditations. You have the Buddha in front, you have the sentient beings surrounding yourself, right? And then you look at the suffering of sentient beings and you think, I need the realization of death and impermanence, for example, you know, to motivate myself. I need to realize that death is definite, right? That the time of death is uncertain, and the only benefit that helps at the time of death is my development of my mind, right? So you think, okay, Buddha, please help me to get these insights. You make your strong prayers, and you think, without death and impermanence, I will not be able to motivate myself. I will not be able to help these beings, right? So that you see the motivation of those beings around you produces a kind of request to the Buddha in front. And then you make this request to the Buddha in front, and then the Buddha is very pleased. The Buddha is always pleased, but if we do virtue, is even more pleased. So that's why you always visualize a smiling Buddha in front. It's very similar to a mother and a naughty child. We're the naughty child, and the Buddha is like the mother. When you do something naughty, and then the mother doesn't show a very happy face, right? Or the father, or whoever takes care. So the Buddha, is of course with compassion, but most of the time we're very naughty, because most of the time we're creating all kind of afflictions in our mind, and we do all kind of stupid things for ourselves sometimes. But now we're sitting down, and we set a good motivation, and we try to be a good human being. So then the Buddha is so happy with us and smiling at us, right? So that's kind of, And then, because you have this incredible intention, you see all those beings around yourself, and you say, wow, they're stuck in samsara. And I have an opportunity, because I have the interest, I have the opportunity to do a course like Discovering Buddhism or other courses. So I should take this opportunity to use it. And then, because I can train myself, I can help those beings eventually. And then you make, based on that intention, you make a request to the Buddha in front. And then the Buddha answers with his first white light, which purifies all negative karma in general. And if you're going to meditate on death and impermanence, also it purifies all obstacles that prevents you from getting the realization or getting the experience of death and impermanence, right? So that's kind of, there's two aspects, right? One aspect is the purification. The other aspect is getting the qualities or getting the imprints of this particular realization. So every topic of the Lamrim you can adjust with this prayer, right? So the white light purifies negative karma in general, but also takes away obstacles of that particular topic you're going to meditate upon. So that's the white light is a purification aspect in general, and in particular of the topic you're going to meditate upon, right? to pacify all obstacles and to make your mind ready. And then the yellowish color of light is then to create the right conditions or the blessings to get all the realizations in general, and in particular, the realization or experience of death and impermanence, if that's you're going to meditate on, right? Does it make sense or not? Yeah. Yeah. So those two levels of colors, yeah, white and yellow, is basically they every time there's the 5 colors, as we say, or like a rainbow color, yeah, with all the 5 colors there, but mainly in aspect of white, because first aspect is purification. The second one, all the 5 colors are there, but mainly in aspect of yellow, because it bestows blessings to get realizations. Yeah? So, yeah, so that's also you can read in those few pages with regards to taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So Rinpoche indicates in between. Yeah. So just get an idea, right, how you can do it. Yeah. Yes, so we do that for a few minutes. You get an idea, and then we do a little bit about 4 measurables after that. Yeah. So you sit, you clean your room, okay? It's all done. You put offerings. Yeah, imagine that's all done. And then, yeah, you imagine in front of yourself about the body's length away, Shakyamuni Buddha. Yeah. And surrounding yourself, all those beings, and they're stuck in samsaric suffering. And, you know, you want to do something about it. And then you make a request to the Buddha and say, you know, all these beings are wandering around the samsara, but I need to do something about it. I need to help them. And for that purpose, I need to purify my mind and get the realizations of the blessings to progress on the path. You know? So try to think, for example, as we do today, I need to contemplate death and impermanence. You know, I need the realization of death and impermanence. So imagine you make a request. Yeah, so first visualize Buddha in front, right? So in front of yourself, about this body's length away, there is Buddha Shakyamuni. So you can imagine there's a throne supported by snow lions. On top of that is lotus, sun, and moon disk. And on top of that is the Buddha. And the Buddha is in full lotus position, yeah, sitting. And his right hand is on his right knee and touching the moon disk. And his left, that's a begging bowl filled with nectar in his lap, right? And has a very peaceful and smiling face. And yeah, the whole image is made out of 3-dimensional image made out of light. So try to think it's pure, and also try to think the place you are sitting in is kind of pure. And then you, so try to visualize that aspect first. The Buddha in front, the place you are in, it's kind of a pure palace or a pure celestial mansion. So imagine that at a moment in front of yourself. And then you can imagine you're surrounding the Buddha. You have countless forms of mentally created offerings. Yeah? So you can think all the things you like, or the things you're attached to, in a very pure form. They just visualized in front and be offered to the Buddha, if you like. Yeah, you can imagine that happening in front of yourself. And then surrounding yourself, you can think there's these countless beings of the different realms, but they're one human aspect and undergoing the individual sufferings. And you want to do something about that. Yeah? So you request the Buddha to bestow blessings and inspiration, and then in particular to first aspect, to bestow purification, to purify all negative karma created since beginningless time, and also all obstacles to get realizations, right? So think that without purifying and without removing obstacles, I will not be able to progress and to help these beings, and they need help, you know. So make this strong request to the Buddha for yourself to bestow blessings and inspiration. And then the Buddha is very pleased, and imagine from the heart of the Buddha comes white nectar light. Yeah? So it's 5 colors, you know, or color of a rainbow if you like, you know, from the heart of the Buddha. And then it's mainly an aspect of white and comes to the crown of your head and the crown of all sentient beings surrounding yourself. And this purifies you, fills your whole body with this white nectar light. And imagine all negative karma gets completely washed away, and all obstacles to get realizations all get completely pacified. All sickness, negative thoughts, imagine that all gets kind of completely pacified. We're receiving this white light. Yeah? Yeah, so let's do that for about a minute or so. And then think that you're completely filled with this white nectar light, and imagine you're completely purified, right? All obstacles are completely pacified, and mind becomes completely pure. All those negative deeds, thoughts, obstacles are all gone, you know? So imagine you're completely filled with white nectar light. And then with the same intention or same looking at suffering sentient beings surrounding yourself, you think, purification, one thing, but I need the potentials for the realization to come about, you know? So, and why? In order to help those beings surrounding myself, I need this kind of potentials, or I need this kind of realizations, or the blessings to get those realizations. So based on that kind of intention, you make a request to the Buddha in front. And then the Buddha is again very pleased, and from his heart comes the 5 colors or rainbow color light, mainly an aspect of yellow, the crown of your head and the crown of all sentient beings. And by receiving this light, you think you get all the realization of the path, you know, the realizations or the blessings, so to say, straight from the Buddha's heart to your crown, and filling your whole body with this yellowish, golden nectar light. Yes, also this we do for visualization for about a minute. So then think you're completely filled with this golden nectar or yellow nectar light. And the mind is completely ready to get realizations, right? So think you received your blessings. Be convinced that actually happened. So yeah, and then after that, normally we do the contemplation meditation. So today maybe just have a little bit of an overview of death and impermanence. So see that that is definite. You cannot escape it. You know, there's no way you can escape. You cannot go to a place or go to a doctor or take a medicine that prevents you from dying, right? There's nothing like that, you know? And that's for sure. It's going to happen. But when we die, this is very uncertain, right? The time, it can happen any moment. Our body is very fragile, you know, so many possibilities of dying, sickness or accidents. And then when we die, the only thing that is of benefit is our mental training, you know. So try to take those three aspects of that we're definitely going to die. There is no escape, right? But the time is very uncertain, and the only thing that is of benefit when we die is not our possessions, but our state of mind, right? So try to contemplate those 3 points also for about a minute or two. And then have a little conclusion that thinks that's true, you know. My life is not going to last forever, and I don't know when that time comes, you know. So now I have this connection with this kind of teachings, or this connection with this kind of mind training or methods. So I better use it right now before it's too late. So take kind of commitment for yourself to use this fortunate opportunity you still have. You know, now you still have it, you might as well, or you should try to use it and take the essence out of this life, you know. So come to that conclusion and then focus on that conclusion for about half a minute. And then we can make strong requests to the Buddha again and say, please bestow blessings to really take the essence out of this opportunity or out of this life and make my life more meaningful, right? So please bestow blessings to do that. And then the Buddha is very pleased and comes to the crown of your head, facing the same direction as you're facing. And then becomes smaller, smaller, the size of your thumb, yeah, something like that. And then descends to your crown, descends to your throat. And then at the level of your heart, you can imagine dissolves into light, it becomes one with your own mind, right? So your mind merges with the qualities of the Buddha of love and kindness, compassion and wisdom. Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of bliss or happy feeling at the level of the heart when the Buddha becomes one with your own mind. All right, so we can stop. Yeah, so that takes about 10 minutes, so something like that. You see, you don't have to read these kind of booklets if you want to do it. If you get familiar with how to visualize and what to do, then you can do something like that, right? So it's kind of 10 minutes a day. And then you can do, if you want to do a little more with some breathing, techniques as we normally do. So yeah, 10, 15 minutes, I think everybody can offer. Yeah, so that's kind of a way to structure, your daily practice in one way. And then, of course, the more you like to do, then you can do, like in this booklet is indicated with the actual 4 measurables and with the 7-limb prayer, for example. Yeah. So that's another thing I was planning to explain today. The 4 measurables, we come to that also later, but in the module on bodhicitta. Yeah, and then there's a 7-limb prayer after that we already went over, right? Yeah, okay. So the 4 immeasurables, they called 4 because there are 4. Yeah. So I give you a traditional explanation of, then some people explain, it's 4 because the number is 4, okay? Immeasurable because the merit or the virtue you accumulate is immeasurable. Why? Because you're thinking about infinite sentient beings, right? Beings without exception, which are immeasurable. So if you think, for example, as Shantideva says in the Bodhisattva Charavatara, if you think about to release one sentient being from their headache or sickness, that's a very positive thought. To have a wish for one being to be free of a physical pain is a very good wish, right? So then Shantideva, that is very superior by itself. There's not many people who have these kind of wishes, right? But then you think not just one individual, but all beings without exception, right? And not just one headache or one sickness, all forms of sickness, meaning all causes of suffering. And so that's kind of, then you can imagine it's kind of immeasurable, right? So because there's an immeasurable amount or infinite amount of beings you have that wish for. So you create the causes for happiness for infinite beings, right? If you have a wish for infinite beings to be free of suffering, and you have a wish for infinite beings always to abide in happiness, you create countless causes for the happiness of well-beings of infinite beings, right? So that's why we call it immeasurable, immeasurables, yeah? Yeah, so there's 4 types, yeah? So there's equanimity, yeah? We already talked about it a little bit here, to see there's no difference between your friend, the neutral person, or the person you met on the street. You have an indifferent feeling towards too, right? And the enemy. Yeah? So your friend, stranger, and enemy, as we often say. Yeah? Friend, enemy, and stranger. We can classify all people we know in those 3 groups, right? Some people who cherish our egos. Oh, friends. Some people who help us and point out our mistakes, or enemy. People we don't know, we have an indifferent feeling towards too, or a stranger, right? So that means, but from their side, if you really analyze well, our dearest friend can be disliked by another person, right? The person we like so much, somebody other completely disagree with us. You see, so then you can see that what we call a friend and what the other person calls an enemy is very subjective. It's not with the object, our friend as such. If our friend exists from its own side as friend, everybody should see that person as a friend, right? And that's not the case. So then if you contemplate that where we attach to our friends and aversion to our enemies, it doesn't make sense. Because from another person's point of view, they see it in a completely different light. It's very subjective, And then over time, change, right? So if you have a person you dislike, you solve the problem, you have something to drink, that was based on misunderstandings, you talk things over, and you can become very good friends, right? That's very true, isn't it? So that means even over time there's a change. Yeah. And it's also true for people we like. I think we talked about these things, that when you're in, you know more about these things than I do. I only have a few years experience, but you know, the person you with relationships, you get attached to a particular individual. I can't wait to live with this person. If I'm with this person, I will be so happy. I will be so happy. And then you're with the person, and then there's some arguments, and then you think, I can't wait to be separated from this person. If I'll be separated from the person, I will be so happy, right? So this happens, right? So that means things are very relative. Yeah, friends. That's a whole aspect of interdependence and relativity, right? That what we classify as a friend can be somebody else's enemy. What we classify as an enemy can be somebody else's friend, right? The person we dislike can be very much liked by somebody else. And even we see that in politics, with presidents, with pop stars, exactly the same thing, right? So that means it's very subjective and relative. So we try to equalize those beings. And also over time, they change, yeah, in our life. Our friend can become an enemy when we have disagreements. Our enemies can become friends. A neutral person you never met before, as you start a conversation, then it might work out very nicely. And then you have a nice conversation and you become friends. You exchange contacts, and before you know it, you meet again, right? That happens, isn't it? You meet a person on public transport or somewhere you never met before, and you think, who is this guy? Or is this lady? Or to me, they say, oh, a monk, oh. But then you start talking, and they see a monk is also just a normal person. And then you start talking, and you become friends, right? So that means that even a neutral person initially looks kind of indifferent in relation to you, and you talk, the person is still the same, right? But then you shift from indifferent feeling to taking care, or you know, if you have a conversation with a person who's in difficulty, for example, and you help, then you will take care, right? It's very interesting. So it's very relative, you know? Yeah, so it means friends, enemies, and strangers, you try to equalize them, yeah? Because it says in this verse that, you know, the friends are because of attachment, the enemies because of hatred, so to say, right? So we say beings being close, yeah, so our friends, and others at distance, meaning enemies we put at a distance, and friends we put close, yeah. So that's the terminology being used in this verse, right? Yeah. So then you make a prayer that you generate this equanimity, and that all beings abide in equanimity. Yeah? There's no discrimination happening, so to say, that every being abides equally. Yeah, so that's what we call equanimity, yeah, or generating equanimity. It's a very, and if you do that for all sentient beings without exception, it's a very powerful mind, right? Because there's no exception anymore. You know? Because otherwise, if there's no equanimity, you say, yes, I want to become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings, except this one. Yeah, yeah. So then it's a sign that your compassion or bodhicitta is not genuine, right? Yeah, so that's why equanimity is very essential in the practice. Yeah, so to equalize those three. Yeah, that's equanimity. First one. The second one is immeasurable love and kindness. You know, here Lama Zopa Rinpoche translates as may all sentient beings achieve Buddhahood, but actually the traditional meaning of love and kindness, of course, is the best that beings achieve Buddhahood, but in the sequence, sometimes we say love and kindness means may all beings abide in happiness, right? As we go over this more when we do the model on bodhicitta. Yeah, the definition of love and kindness is the wish for all sentient beings to abide in happiness. Yeah, so that's the meaning of love and kindness, you know? So love, as we have romantic love, we often use, right? So yeah, you can debate how that relate with each other, or it's mixed with attachment or not, or is with a general form of love and kindness or not, right? But traditionally we say love and kindness is defined as a mind that wishes others to abide in happiness, right? Yeah, so that's a mind that wishes others to be always happy or abides in happiness, right? So there's a second one, love and kindness. So if you extend that to all sentient beings, not only your friends, but all beings without exception, based on equanimity, right? Then you can imagine it's a very powerful mind, right? The mind of love and kindness, not just for one individual, for all beings without exception. And that's also why in this sequence, we first meditate on equanimity. Yeah, so you see all beings as equal. And then you generate a wish for all beings to abide in happiness. right? Makes sense or not? Yeah, the structure. So if you see all sentient beings as equal, and you want all sentient beings to abide in happiness, then when they suffer, you generate a kind of compassion, right? So that's kind of the third immeasurable is the immeasurable of compassion. Yeah. So also compassion, as we know, has a particular definition, right? Or compassion is defined as a mind that wishes others to be free of suffering. Yeah. So a wish for others to be free of suffering, and in a particular more sophisticated form is a wish for sentient beings to be suffering and the cause of suffering, right? Yeah, because if beings are free of afflictions, then they don't suffer, right? So that's the real genuine form of compassion we should try to generate, that beings be free of any form of suffering. Yeah, it means to be free of suffering and their causes. Yeah. So compassion is defined as beings to be free of suffering and their causes, right? You could think. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the third immeasurable, the immeasurable of compassion. Yeah. So love and kindness is the wish for others to abide in happiness. Well, compassion is the wish for others to be separated from suffering. Yeah. So that's kind of two aspects there. Yeah. Yeah. And those two aspects are there. Why are those two aspects there? Because about, I don't know, did we talk about the meaning of life? I mean, there's many interpretations. What's the meaning of life, right? You can go in endless discussions. What is the meaning of life? You know? But the real meaning, I don't know, also in the, no, don't take, what's this, Monty Python, they also talk about, always look at the bright side of life, was the song, right? Yeah. It's also very good to look at the bright side of life all the time. But anyway, so Kasa, the meaning of life, if you we really analyze what beings want and not want, beings want happiness and don't want suffering, right? Every individual has exactly the same wish, day and night, spontaneous, without thinking about it. Every person likes happiness and doesn't like suffering. Yeah, that's pretty clear, right? So because there are the two aims of beings, right? And that's exactly why the Buddha so skillfully put that as two very important pillars in the training. And so in love and kindness, all beings abide in happiness, compassion, all beings free of suffering, right? Makes sense, no? You can debate what is the meaning of life, but yeah, from a Buddhist perspective, we think the meaning of life is all beings want happiness, don't want suffering, right? Yeah. And there's various methods people use, but many people, they use the wrong methods. And that's why people are stuck in samsara, right? So luckily in these kind of trainings, we learn how to actually use the correct methods. Yeah. So that is love and kindness and compassion. Yeah. 2 and 3. Then the fourth one is immeasurable joy. Yeah. So then we talk about freedom of suffering, of being free of suffering and abide in happiness, right? But then we contemplate, yes, but we have to have something that is beyond the temporary happiness. We have to have something that is beyond a temporary freedom from suffering. We need beings to be free of suffering forever. We need beings to abide in happiness forever, right? The only way to establish that is that sentient beings go to higher rebirths, as humans, for example, and eventually achieve liberation, right? Because when you achieve liberation, there is no suffering anymore. So you generate a wish not just for temporary freedom of suffering or for temporary happiness of beings, but for a kind of irreversible form of happiness or a sustainable form of happiness, whatever term you like to use, of the happiness and bliss of liberation. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So you see it builds up, right? First equanimity, then love and kindness, then compassion, and then a more sophisticated way of may they be free of all suffering forever. May they always abide in happiness. Yeah, so that's why in the last verse it says, may they never be separated from the happiness of higher rebirths and liberation. Yeah, so it's a step further, right? It's kind of the real form of development that should be, Yeah, so there are the 4 immeasurables in an extreme brief explanation, but you get at least the structure is clear, right? That equanimity, what does that mean? Yeah, that all beings are equal between friends, enemies, strangers, right? Then a wish for all of them to abide in happiness, yeah, love and kindness. then a wish for them to be free of suffering in general, yeah, compassion, and then for them to always have happiness and always be free of suffering. Yeah, that means higher rebirth and liberation. Yeah, you see, it builds up. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that's one aspect of the build-up. There's an aspect of the build-up of the four immeasurables, right? But each of those four immeasurables also has a build-up. Yeah, so the first one in each of those four is the structure is the same, right? How wonderful will it be? Yeah, that's the first one. How wonderful will it be if all sentient beings are abiding in equanimity, for example? Yeah. Or how wonderful it be if all sentient beings abide in happiness? Or how wonderful it be if all sentient beings be separated from suffering? Or how wonderful it would be if all sentient beings achieve higher rebirths and liberation? Yeah, so the first one is how wonderful would it be? The second one is Mayday. You see there's a sequence there. How wonderful is this a general thought or a general wish, right? How wonderful would it be? The second step is Mayday. Mayday actually have equanimity. May they abide in happiness. May they be separate from suffering. May they have high rebirths and liberation. You see that? There's also a strength is in enhancing, right? First is how wonderful it would be, and then the next one is may they be, you know? So then the third one is taking responsibility. I will cause them to abide in equanimity. I will cause them to abide in happiness. I will cause them. May I be a cause. May I create, you know, sentient beings to be free of suffering. May I be a cause for them to always have high rebirths and liberation. There's a responsibility aspect, you see? There's also their build-up, right? May they, you know? So, yeah, oh, sorry, how wonderful would it be? May they be? Yeah, I will cause them to be. You see? There's also a structure. You see that? Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of a structure, and that structure can be enhanced for a Buddhist practitioner to say, please, Guru Buddha, bless me able to do this. Or please, Buddha, bless me able to do this. Yeah? So that's kind of within each of the four immeasurables, we see four build-ups, right? How wonderful, may they, I will cause them, you know? Please, Buddha, bless me able to do this. You know, so that's same as we did in the meditation just now. We also requested the Buddha to help, right? And to bestow blessings, you know? And it's very similar with these kind of four immeasurables. You also can make prayers like that, you know? And then the Buddhas, if you have faith, they bestow blessings, and then you move your mind stronger in that direction, right? That makes sense or not? Yeah? Yeah. So yeah, there's a little bit about four measurables, but don't worry, we come over these points back when we do the model on Kasa, on bodhicitta. Yeah, later on. Yeah. Just to get you an overview of what is happening in this booklet, you know. So yeah, you can make your daily practice longer. You can contemplate those four immeasurables, for example, if you wish, right? Yeah, or keep it simple as we just did in meditation. That's also possible. But you can also make it longer. Do this four immeasurables, and then the 7-limb prayer, as we went already over before. So you can read in this booklet again. And you got a write-up. I wrote to you. I wrote a few points, right? So then you see in this, if you read through this booklet, also what to think again, as we already talked about it, but then you get another, because there's a different way. Sometimes different people tell things in a different way, right? So you can read and see how to, and then you pick out things you find beneficial for your mind, right? Yeah. And there's the mandala offering. Also that later on, we'll go in more detail, because the mandala offering is the greatest offering you can imagine. If you offer the whole universe, there's nothing excluded, right? So if you offer the whole universe to all the Buddhas, there is no other form of offering. Yeah, yeah, in a beautiful form, not with all the dirty stuff everywhere, but in the whole universe in a pure form, right? Yeah, like celestial mansions and things like that. Yeah. And there's a few verses of request, and then the last aspect, or second last aspect in this booklet, is the foundation of all good qualities on page number 23. That prayer, if you have time, the foundation of all good qualities, is a very good prayer if you get a little bit an idea of the Lamrim. And if you recite it every day, you put potentials in your mind for each and every topic of the Lamrim, right? So the foundation of all good qualities is a very important aspect of the Lamrim. Yeah, if you do that on a daily basis, then there's one verse for every topic, so to say. So in the end of the booklet on page number 23, you will see there is this foundation of all good qualities, right? So you can read it. And then, because all the models we do in discovering Buddhism is the same way, its structure is exactly the same, you know, as in the foundation of all good qualities. So then you can look at the different models we have in discovering Buddhism, and then you read this prayer, and then you see, oh, this prayer is actually taking those models step by step with one verse for each model, right? So if you, now we study things in individual models, yeah, but then when you get the information together and you read this prayer, you get an overview, right? Yeah, so yeah, we go over that one more time later on. Yeah. And then, yeah, then there's a mantra recitation as we do with what we just did with the light, nectar lights, right? The white light and the golden light. While you do the nectar light, maybe we can do that from the next time onwards to get used to the mantra as well. There's a mantra on page number 26, yeah, the mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha. You can recite while you're doing the visualization. For example, when you do the white light, you can recite that mantra, right? And when you do the golden light, you can recite that mantra. It has about more powerful because there's a visualization as well as a verbalization, right? And your mind is thinking in a positive way. So that brings more effect on the mind, you could say, you know? Yeah, so that's the mantra on page number 26. And then, yeah, after that is the absorption, as we already did ourselves. You can either visualize the Buddha in front, dissolve into light and dissolve into you, or you can do what we just did. The Buddha comes to the crown of your head, becomes smaller and descends, dissolves to light, and becomes one with your own mind, right? Yeah, so that's also there being described on page number 27. And then you dedicate, you know, as we normally always dedicate at the end of every event or talk, or so there's a few dedication prayers in the booklet as well. Yeah, yeah, and you just have to read a few times and then see what benefits your mind, and you can use that. You don't have to do the whole booklet every day and rush through it. That doesn't make sense as a beginner, right? So take things step by step, make it simple. It's better to start with a few small things and keep going rather than want to do too much in the beginning and then get tired after some time and give up. So it's much more skillful to start with small things at a time, and slowly, when you feel the interest is there, you can do a little bit more, right? So continuity and quality is much more important than quantity. And that's very important, that the quality is important, you know? So that's yeah. So that's a little bit about this booklet to be explained today. Yeah, a little bit over time, but yeah, that's always the case. Yeah. So if there's any questions, then yeah, we can yeah, go over it. Yeah.
First of all, thanks for your marvelous teachings. When you mentioned about cleansing the room, you said about using 2 sticks of incense.
No, for cleaning, you can just use 1 stick, but for inviting the Buddha, right, you can use 2.
That's why you use 2.
Yeah, because that refers to, you can say, method and wisdom, for example, you know, so that, yeah, this is a traditional way to, yeah, that's how it's been done in a tradition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or the 2 bodies of a Buddha, you can think, but yeah, then becomes, yeah, just keep it simple, method and wisdom for the time being, right? Yeah. Or you can think about the mind of the Buddha. The Buddha also has a mind as a body, right? So those are those two aspects you invite. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No more questions, Geshe?
Oh, what's happening?
You've answered them all?
Everybody has a heat stroke or something like that. People in Spain, just to joke aside, people in Spain, here in the UK, when it gets like 28 degrees, it's kind of a heat wave. Yeah. But in Spain is, I think, a bit more, right? Yeah.
Sarah, you've raised your hand. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, sorry, very quick one. I think there was an email
That's all
about
right.
maybe.
One moment, Sarah. We have a sound issue. It's just very quiet. One moment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Try again.
Try again.
Yeah, just thank you for the
Keep
teachings.
talking. Keep talking.
Is it working? Testing.
Keep talking. Just tell us a story.
Hello. Hello. Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Now,
All
yeah.
good?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, just thank you for the teachings. Just a quick question about, there's an email that went round about potential retreat to France
Okay.
this summer, and I just wondered if that was, yeah, that's going ahead or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Sarah. We're just confirming whether there are spaces to open up to discovering Buddhism and exploring Buddhism students. So there should be some communication coming around about that very, very soon. So yeah.
Amazing, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, easy evening. Normally we always finish by 20 past or something. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's the weather. Okay. So let's dedicate, because that's the conclusion of every practice, right? So you have here also our dedication prayers. And then when you dedicate, as we just said before, Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to put a lot of emphasis on sealing it with emptiness. Yeah. Then of course our understanding of emptiness is very superficial, but it means that if you think about dependent origination and you think you making the prayer, right? The prayer itself and the aim we pray towards too, right? So there's yourself, the prayer, and the result we aim to those three are in the nature of dependence, right? So, and they don't exist from their own side. So while you recite the prayer, if you think about those aspects, that what we call kind of sealing it with the truth, or sealing it with emptiness, you know. So that means that prayer becomes much more profound, you know. Otherwise, it's the good things we do is often contaminated because we always think about an I to exist from its own side, right? We come to these points in great detail. I mean, great detail, in more detail in the model on wisdom, right? Model on emptiness, so to say. Yeah. So yeah, when we also dedicate, then also think you, the dedicator, and the dedication, and the aim you dedicate towards two are independence upon each other, right? This is kind of relationships, so to say. And that's why the prayer or the dedication actually comes through. That's the cause and effect relationships, right? That nothing exists from its own side. Yeah. So take it into account and then dedicate for the spreading of the Buddha Dharma in the various directions and long and healthy life for precious gurus and swift return Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And then also in particular to generate the two aspects or the two pillars of the path, yeah, bodhicitta and realization of emptiness. Yeah. So try to think in that way when we dedicate. Yeah. Dagi jine sawe gewa di tendan roa gyundan kam. Yeba jesun lozan draba yi tembe nyingbo ringdo selje shun. May the glorious Guru's life be long and stable, beings equal in space and happiness. And may I and others without exception accumulate merit and purify negativities. And may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Tu den chi da han ja han gyun gye den jo ya pe ma ga je ra zu ba sum de nyu mi zin be jun yi je da den be den du nyu je sho ja jo san jo rimbo je ma ye pa na ge gyu ji Geba nyamba meba yang gone gonde bewa shu toni tawa rimbo che magye panang gyu chi geba nyamba meba yang gone gonde bewa shu. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. Keep cool. It's not, yeah, not only physically, but also mentally. Yeah. Okay. See you next week. Thank you.